Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about this amazing decision from the US Supreme Court in a decision where a 6-3 decision, which means six judges voted in favor of the decision and three were dissenters. The Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump's entire tariff regime is unconstitutional. He does not have the inherent powers to impose tariffs across the board the way he has been doing for the past 1 year. And he has thrown American foreign policy. The Supreme Court has thrown the American foreign policy and basically Donald Trump's international agenda, whatever his purposes were, to bring back manufacturing to the United States, to alter the terms of conditions with trade with most of the countries in the world. All of that has been completely reversed by the Supreme Court. Even though the Supreme Court is a majority conservative Supreme Court, there are 6 conservative judges and 3 liberal judges. In fact, 2 of the 3 judges that Donald Trump himself appointed, Thomas Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, both voted against this decision. Only Kavanaugh is the one who dissented. So even among the judges that he handpicked, the decision was 2-1 and 6-3 of the Supreme Court. Look, in the beginning, when he made this on several times on my show, I have argued and showed you the US Constitution, that it is very clear that the Constitution places the authority to levy taxes and customs and duties in the Congress. So the Congress has the authority to do it. The president does not have any authority to levy these tariffs or taxes or customs in any form at all. So right off the bat, it was very clear that there is going to be a constitutional issue with these tariffs. But Donald Trump continued for 1 year using tariffs as a main instrument of his foreign policy, as a coercive diplomacy tool across the board, and essentially ruined relations with allies and made most of the world completely uncertain, and made the United States one of the most unreliable great powers in the world today because of the manner in which he has been imposing tariffs. For many of the countries, they seem to be unfair or arbitrary. But does that mean that this is all over? I don't think so. Donald Trump has used a particular law passed in 1970s called the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, IEEPA, which was actually passed in context of Iran, and American presidents in the last 50 years have used this law only to impose sanctions in a very limited way. No one has ever used this to impose tariffs. The law itself does not use the word tariffs or duties. So it was a very creative use of a particular law, and Donald Trump thought that he would get away with it. It shows a particular this administration has shown complete disregard for American Constitution and American laws and human decency, basically. And so even in the application of IEEPA, it was very clear that Donald Trump was not paying attention to what was in the law. Now, the fear was that given the fact that in the past the Supreme Court has bent the knee to Donald Trump, it is quite possible, recognizing how important the use of tariffs was for Donald Trump's second term's agenda, it is quite possible that the Supreme Court would once again bend the knee and find some way to say that this is okay. But it has come as a great surprise and restored to some extent faith in the US Supreme Court and in the American Constitution. The American Constitution's genius is that it has a divided government, that there is a balance of power. But since Donald Trump's presidency, the Congress has increasingly become useless and has never exercised its constitutional authority to challenge the president. It has often acted as the cheerleader for the president rather than a counterbalance to the executive order. So at least the Supreme Court has now restored some faith in the US government's architecture and the US Constitution. But does that mean that there is relief for the world out there? I'm not very sure entirely. There's going to be total chaos inside the United States for sure. Now the question happens, like, what happens to the goods that are coming today, that are going to be unloaded from the ships today? Do they have to pay customs or not? Are people going to just read news and say, oh, the Supreme Court has struck it down? And will the Customs and Border Police simply not collect taxes, customs and tariffs? I don't know. The order has to come from Donald Trump, or at least Commerce Secretary Scott Bessent, or someone has to come out and say that stop collecting tariffs. And until then, I think the agencies which are collecting tariffs, they may continue to do so. So I don't know what's happening at that level. But the bigger problem is for Donald Trump is that over 100 companies have now already sued the U.S. government. Apparently, uh, some of the bigger retailers are already demanding that the tariffs that they have already paid be restored to them and returned to them. And so there is like, who is going to restore it? There is no procedure, no process, no designated, I guess, agencies who are going to be involved in returning. So far, the US has collected over $133 billion in taxes, in customs and tariffs. And so just returning them will be absolutely chaotic. And I can tell you this much, that the federal government is not going to rush in payment. It's going to probably take years before that is returned, that money to those who have already paid those tariffs. So there's going to be a lot of litigation. Does the Department of Justice have the bandwidth to fight all these cases that are now going to be filed? Domestically, we know that over 100 companies have already sued the federal government. Now it depends what the international reaction is going to be. People have very cautiously responded that they are studying, like the European Union has said, we are studying the decision by the Supreme Court very carefully, and we don't know what that means. So what happens to all the bilateral trade agreements that Donald Trump has signed with India, with European Union, with Japan, with China, with nearly all the countries in the world? Donald Trump has negotiated, I think, I remember Howard Lutnick was bragging that they were going to have 90 deals in 90 days. So what will happen to all those bilateral trade agreements, and what will happen to the non-tariff related agreements which are part of those trade agreements? For example, Japan has promised to invest $600 billion in the United States. South Korea has promised $350 billion, European Union $750 billion, India $500 billion. These are commitments that these countries have made to investing in India, in the US, or buying additional products from the US. Will those countries, will Trump be able to demand that those countries live up to those agreements that they have made? In fact, the big question is, given that the basis for the tariffs itself has been deemed unconstitutional by the US Supreme Court and illegal, does that mean that the trade agreements that have already been agreed upon, I don't know whether all the trade agreements have been signed upon already, but they have agreed upon, and are they still valid? That is the question. So that's a big puzzle. So not only is, shall we say, the domestic side of this in chaos as far as Donald Trump is concerned, I think the entire economy and global trade is in a limbo right now, so they don't know what to do going forward. It is very clear that Donald Trump is not just going to embrace this decision from the Supreme Court. He has signaled many times, trying to lobby the Supreme Court by saying this will cause chaos, this will completely undermine his economic agenda, etc., hoping that the Supreme Court would find some way to let him continue with levying taxes. But I think the Supreme Court is worried with the precedent that Donald Trump was setting, because look, Donald Trump is not going to be president forever, and so they are probably, the conservative judges are probably worried about what the Democrats will do when they are in power, given the kind of things that Donald Trump is allowed to do by the U.S. Supreme Court. So now the question is, what will the other countries do? Will they assume that the bilateral trade agreements are moot? So is that the end of it all, or is Donald Trump going to insist that that the foreign countries be? Is he going to insist that countries adhere to the commitments that they have made, and if they didn't, he would find some other way to punish them. Does Donald Trump have alternatives other than IEEPA to justify these tariffs? So there are two things that the Supreme Court has said, that the authority to levy taxes and customs and tariffs, etc., reside in the Congress and not in the presidency, in the executive branch of the government. And they also said that that IEEPA does not give Donald Trump this broad authority to use this as a foreign policy instrument. Uh, so, so what is he going to do? So there are three other options. Let me quickly run them down. So there is Section 232, which says that the United States president can impose tariffs for national security purposes, which Donald Trump has used to impose, I think, 15% tariffs across the board for aluminum and steel imports. He wants aluminum and steel to be made at home because they are the main elements that go into war machinery, and so it's part of the national security. I think that's probably something that the courts will easily uphold. But importing leather goods and slippers and footwear from India, undergarments from Bangladesh, shirts from Pakistan, and all of these things, can he justify them under national security, saying it is in our national security interest that we charge 18% tariffs on footwear coming from India? I'm not very sure that the court will uphold that and find that justifiable. So 302 may not apply. So what else does he? 232 may not apply, but he has another option called 301 section, which gives the president some authority to deal with unfair trade practices. And I think that is where this administration is going to go, because he can make the argument, Donald Trump, that all these countries which have trade deficit with the United States, it is because of unfair trade practices. There are non-tariff barriers, which are very clear. Most of the countries have very high non-tariff barriers against the US, no doubt about it. The countries that I have looked at, whether it is even, say, for example, Japan, which exports $150 billion worth of cars to the US every year, has non-tariff barriers to prevent Americans from exporting cars to Japan. India has non-tariff barriers about medical equipment, 110% tariffs on cars. These are all unfair trade practices. So Donald Trump can easily justify those, saying that, well, these are the unfair trade practices because of which I'm living. So he'll have to find alternate justice. Now the question is, can he make a sweeping judgment, or he'll have to go case by case, country by country, court by court? So we will see what happens with that as to how systematically is this administration capable of transferring legal justification for all the trade agreements and tariffs that they have imposed on various countries in the world. Trump is definitely going to bully many of the weaker countries and tell them that, look, forget what the US Supreme Court says. You're going to pay the tariffs. As I said, I'm just going to just redraft the executive order and invoke different sources of legal justification, which is my internal problem. It's nothing to do. But there are countries like maybe Canada and Mexico, which may go to American courts, and maybe European Union, Japan, South Korea, even China. So we will see how strongly do foreign countries respond to this and demand that either Donald Trump renegotiate the deal, or basically that the deal is moot, because Trump doesn't have the authority to make that particular agreement. And there's another one option that he has. It's called Section 201 to 204 or something, which are laws against anti-dumping. I'm not very sure that what other countries are doing. Look, if the United States is buying something very vital from any particular country, I'm not sure it can be easily labeled as dumping. And so while some things that come from China may constitute dumping, I'm not very sure it'll apply. But the point is simple. I noticed in the comment section that some of you are asking me to do this in Hindi. I actually have already done a Hindi show. So just go to the video section of the YouTube channel and you will find my entire take in Hindi. And I was also on Satya Hindi with an extensive discussion. You can see that too. So I think one thing that is very clear is that this is going to weaken Donald Trump at home significantly. Plus, it should embolden the Republicans who disagree with Donald Trump but are afraid to stand up to him, especially in the Congress. If the Supreme Court can stand up, if two of the three judges that Donald Trump himself handpicked and appointed to the Supreme Court, if they can stand up to Donald Trump, then why can't the Republicans? So it is quite possible that Donald Trump is going to see more resistance from within his own party now as a result of that. But you never know. I'm still wishful thinking but it is extremely positive. It restores faith in the American Constitution. It restores faith in the American architecture of American democracy. So in a way, this is a great day for democracy. This is a great day for those who disagree with Donald Trump's domestic and foreign policy agenda. And there are some interesting consequences, perhaps. Already, Donald Trump has sort of retreated on his horrible deportation agenda after what happened in Minnesota and Minneapolis. So he's already on the back foot on the deportation issue. Now he's going to be back foot on his tariff agenda. The fourth quarter reports are not very good. The GDP has grown by only 1.4%. The administration is blaming that on the government shutdown. The government has shut down again right now in some parts of it. So at least the Department of Justice is having trouble finding funds, I think, because no agreement has been. So Donald Trump is suffering setbacks after setbacks. And it is definitely going to weaken him. And one more thing that we should keep in mind is that this tariff policy was not very popular either with the American corporate world, the businesses, or with ordinary Americans. Polls suggest that only 37% of Americans approved in the manner in which Donald Trump was using tariffs, and then there were 60+%. So basically, a 2:1 ratio, Americans disapproved of Donald Trump's tariff policy, and that probably also gave the Supreme Court judges some courage to stand up to Donald Trump, understanding fully well that more than 2/3 of the country was with them in that sense. So anyway, this is a good day for American Constitution, good day for American foreign policy, a very bad day for Donald Trump and his agenda. We will see how MAGA reacts. Will Donald Trump now continue to do stupid things like go to war with Iran? A protracted war could cause a lot of American casualties, destabilize the Middle East, and of course also upset the MAGA crowd, who fully understands that this war is not in America's interest at all. This is a war that America, if it fights, will be fighting for Israel. So Donald Trump's foreign policy, other than the tariffs, the non-tariff side has been mostly Israel first rather than America first. And so if Donald Trump is weakened on his main agenda, which was his America first agenda, which was tariffs, and if he loses that, he will have to fight hard to get some kind of control on that. And he will, no doubt about it. But will that mean that his agenda to go to war with Iran, which is going to be far more serious than, it's not going to be like Venezuela. So we will see what happens going forward. But this much is very clear, that Donald Trump has been weakened significantly at home today by the US Supreme Court. It has taught him a lesson in the US Constitution. There is a possibility that we might have a bigger constitutional crisis if Donald Trump decides not to act. If Donald Trump decides not to act accordingly and simply decides to go against the Supreme Court's decision, then what happens? I'm not very sure such a thing has ever happened in American history. American presidents have respected the Constitution more or less. They have tried to get around it, they have lied about it, etc., but not openly defied it. We will see what happens. So I'm waiting to see. Donald Trump right now is sitting with the governors. There's a governors convention going on, and we have yet to hear from him. And then very soon we will also have the State of the Union address, where Donald Trump will not be able to gloat about how his tariff policy has made America rich and prosperous all over again. And one more thing that I think he was planning to do, which was to send checks to Americans in October, just before the midterm elections. Checks for 2000 is what was suggested, that he would send checks to Americans saying this is the money that is coming from the tariffs that I have imposed. And so now everybody is getting rich on the tariffs. I'm not sure whether he'll be able to do that, because that money now has to be returned. Like I said, he's going to take a lot of time to return that money. But the question remains whether he is able to restore. So we will see what happens going forward. And uh, so thank you very much, Rohit. Today is Friday, so I have to go to pray now. But I'll come back from the prayer. And for those of you who are still in the western side of the world, will be able to watch me live, I will do another show after Donald Trump's response to it, if he says anything meaningful, that is. So thank you for watching Conversations. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press that bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your social political network. Until next time, take care. Bye.